And I'm very impressed that you do have these kids here. I support having the nice treatment, the medical care, and the chance for these kids to catch their breath after living in awful circumstances. And I'm really very, very impressed with your courage and your insight and your sense of humanity. There's been a lot of things said that are fear-mongering, in my opinion. I don't agree with the conclusions. I don't think that the money from the government is the issue. These kids have lived in circumstances that are worse than we can even imagine. And I'm from the Chicago area, originally from Chicago, Detroit, LA. All the places that we have awful problems for kids to have to live with. These kids must have lived in worse, because they aren't going to leave. They aren't bad kids with bad manners who want a better, easy life. They are afraid. And I commend you for being good Americans, strong and courageous.
And advisors, thank you for this very important evening to hear opinions. As I say, I'm from Rockingham County, so we partner with Augusta County, so we also care about the juvenile facility and how it is used. We have all heard of the children fleeing the conditions in Central America. If I can hear any agreement in this room this evening, I think there's overwhelming agreement that our immigration system needs fixing. I don't think I've met anybody who doesn't acknowledge that. But that's serious, and that's not a problem that we're going to solve this evening, or that I intend to even address this evening, because this is not an immigration problem that we're looking at. We know that there are children who are fleeing horrific circumstances. We know there are whole neighborhoods that are cleaned out by basically drug cartel situations. And the history is complex. There were death squads in the 80s in El Salvador and other countries, Honduras and Guatemala. I was involved with helping our government try to give asylum to people who were victims of death squads. People who came to this country couldn't get political asylum. Our government was supporting the government in El Salvador. People were sent back, shot by the death squad, survived the shooting, and came back and were denied again. That's how hard it was to prove that you really were fleeing the danger of violence and persecution in those countries. There's a serious history here. We aren't responsible for everything there, but we've done a lot. We've been part of a lot. We've destabilized some governments that were fairly elected. We've provided arms and military support and supported with our distorted asylum policies the things that were happening in the 80s and 90s. Some things come around again, and we're responsible for some things. Not totally responsible, but we have responsibility. If I needed to, I would stand here and say to you, look, many of us in this room and in this country subscribe to the belief that children should be sheltered, that there are more verses in the Bible about doing the right thing for the alien and stranger among you than just about anything else in the Bible. But I don't need to stand here and say that to you, because we are a government of laws. And if I could show you an illustration. What I want to say is this is America's finest hour. Refugees from violence are legal. We're not talking about immigration cases. We're talking about people who are fleeing these situations. A 9-year-old girl who won't give up her bicycle to that gang guy. They slit her throat, stuff her underwear into it, and leave the body. What does that do to a community? What does it do? I'm a mother of 3 sons. The mother whose son has to stay in his house and get his homework shipped in packets so he can graduate from high school. His friend came here, was deported back, was shot within a week. What does that do to that neighborhood? Whole neighborhoods are cleaned out by these drug gangs. These are the inheritors of the death squad governments, and they have come back to haunt us. But we have a legal responsibility. There are huge humanitarian and moral responsibilities here. I commend you for having any children in your jurisdiction. I've been on the phone trying to find out where the children are. Can I volunteer to help do interviewing for political asylum status? This is not immigration. This is our big moral responsibility. We are Americans. This is one of the finest things we do. And yes, we're not very well geared up to process it quicker. I heard the remark about 5 years, and what a pity. Nobody should have to wait that long. We can gear up. After 9/11, we geared up. We did things we needed to do, and we've got the resources to do it. And they're federal and state. Let's be sensible and be real. We're going to work together on this. This is an obligation our nation has. It's important. I commend you for your part. And I want to say, too, I come from a community, and I think Augusta County is like this, too. We have a history of helping and sheltering a huge array of people who needed to settle in this country. I've seen Kurdish families in our community who went out of their way to support the U.S. government and who came to this country, and I saw a judge from the bench look at them after they had transferred money, technically violating the law. He looked at them and said, there was smoke but no fire here. You have made this your home. You are welcome here. It's powerful, it's important, and you're doing something really good. I want to commend you for it, and I want to say our communities are strong. Our faith communities are strong. We've got dozens and dozens of people, dozens of families in our area, and I know you do too here, where we have done refugee resettlement, we've stepped up, and we have benefited enormously from it.
Gracias por la oportunidad.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Sí, mi nombre es Wilfredo, soy de Salvador.
My name is Wilfredo. I'm from El Salvador.
Nadie más conoce que yo que soy de allá.
Nobody else knows, especially me since I'm from El Salvador.
Y también somos parte de América porque estamos en el centro.
And we're also part of America. We're in Central America.
Es para mí preocupante la situación que pasa en los países nuestros
It's very worrisome for me, the situations that happen in our country.
y hay que identificar quién es un delincuente y quién es un niño.
And let's identify who's a delinquent and who is a child.
En mi caso, yo dejé dos hijos allá. Tengo 15 años de vivir en este país y he pagado taxis desde que he venido.
I left 2 of my own back in my country. I've lived here for 15 years and I pay taxes.
Lo digo por lo que he estado oyendo.
I say this because of what I've been hearing.
También pago taxes. Nunca he pedido al gobierno acá en los Estados Unidos.
I too pay taxes and I've never asked for benefits from the government here.
Y esos niños que están desprotegidos por las pandillas u otros motivos de Centroamérica, prácticamente es frustrante.
And those children who are persecuted by the gang, that's very worrisome.
Ellos vienen buscando un refugio.
They're coming here to find some kind of refuge.
Y yo también doy el respaldo a nuestros hermanos y amigos de nuestras comunidades de estos niños.
And I also support the people in this community for these children.
Nada más les digo que apoyo también a los niños que están en este lugar y están en el resto de Estados Unidos, porque ellos vienen pidiendo protección y no vienen, como he oído decir de que también son parte de los problemas de las familias, porque vienen huyendo por no entrar a esos sitios.
And I'm also here saying, supporting the children who are here in our community and those children across the country who are trying to find a safe home. And they're not, like other people have stated that they're criminals, they are running away from gangs. They're not gang members, they're running away from them.
Me gustaría quizás que nuestra comunidad acá en el exterior conociera más a fondo directamente los testimonios de estos niños, para que después entonces sea la historia o nuestro pueblo que juzgue lo que está pasando.
I would like for more members of the community to hear the stories of the children, so that then you can have a different perspective.
Gracias.
Mi nombre es Amparo Saldívar y estoy aquí para apoyar a los niños.
My name is Amparo Saldívar and I'm here to support the refugee children.
El sábado pasado estuve en una reunión que se estuvo ahí por
This Saturday I was at this gathering.
y me doy cuenta de cuánto odio y desprecio por los niños y por los inmigrantes.
And I see how much hate and people have against these children.
Yo tengo aquí más de 25 años. Yo he trabajado duro. Me han puesto a trabajar. Me recuerdo muchos años atrás.
I've been here for
Me
many
ponían a
years,
trabajar por doble turno.
25 years, and
Me
I'm working
quitaban
really hard jobs.
la mitad de mi.
They would take a lot of taxes away from
Me
me,
quitaban la mitad de mi dinero y
a lot of my money.
estamos pagando taxas.
We are paying
No
taxes.
necesitamos nada.
We're not taking anything from anyone.
¿Y por qué tanto desprecio si nosotros ilegales indocumentados venimos a hacer los trabajos más pesados y más cochinos
And why,
que otras personas no quieren hacer.
why so much hate if a lot of
Dios-
undocumented immigrants are doing
Dios
the jobs that people don't want to do?
Dios hizo el mundo para todos, porque somos tan egoístas, ya casi nos estamos muriendo
God
y
made
todavía
this
tenemos
world for
tanto
everyone.
odio.
And I don't know why people have so much hate.
Es todo.
My name is Alicia Huber, and I live in Rockingham County. Thank you for opening this discussion this evening. I have been listening to everyone's comments, and I've heard a lot about money, and I've heard a lot about the role of government. And I'm not a lawyer, and my bank statement will tell you I don't know a lot about money, but I'm here before you as a mother and as a Christian peacemaker. I was first became aware of this issue of all of these children coming across the border when I heard a story on the radio, and they interviewed some children who were in a detention center, and one girl was 12 and she was there with her brother who was 4. My son's almost 4, and I can't imagine him making a journey across the desert. I can't imagine sending him with people I may or may not be able to trust, scraping together every penny I might have to do it. And I don't mean to say that the parents sending their children are bad parents. I think they are desperate in a way I cannot begin to imagine. And I would like to believe that if the tables were turned and I had to entrust my children to the fates and send them to Guatemala, that the communities there would treat them with kindness and dignity. I teach my son every day how I want him to treat people. And every day I teach him what my mother tried to teach me and what I think your mother's taught you, which is that the golden rule is the absolute most important thing when we decide how we're going to treat people. And I would hope that we would treat these children exactly the way we would hope people would treat our children. They're just kids. They're kind of really crazy situation. And as Ruth just said, we kind of caused part of it. We're not totally blameless. So I leave you with that thought. Who are your kids? Who would you want taking care of them and how?
Roachford. I'm a Stanton resident. I'm on Woodmont Drive. As others have done, I sincerely thank you, of the Board of Supervisors, for having the patience and the tenacity to hear from a great many of us on this issue, which is charged. And I want to begin by acknowledging the truthfulness of a lot of things I've heard tonight. Certainly squarely the claim that our nation has a moral duty to those who live here, and I think in some sense, in a derivative way, a moral duty to those attempting to immigrate, needs to control its borders, police its borders, and needs to have a cohesive and whole immigration policy. And I think that's something that right and left rightly agree upon. I think a lot of others of us would agree that unfortunately both political parties are demagoguing this issue, both with some callow political aims in mind. And I say that as the son of a very Goldwater Republican and an Adlai Stevenson Democrat. Please, no applause. How alarming. I also would say that some truthful statements have also been made that some people coming to our shores, probably some of whom are young, have committed crimes, and that some are coming who are quite ill. And I've been part of medical teams to Honduras and El Salvador, and I can tell you I did encounter some young people and some old people who were quite ill. Encountered them in our own land as well. At risk of trying people's patience with the tiniest bit of history, I've also heard it said that there's a danger and a peril in bringing people to our nation who bring potentially lethal or untreatable diseases, people who have no visible means of self-support, and people who will be a burden. I would want you to know that the exact same things, only in much more strident language, were said about my family. When 165 years ago, we came to this country in what was then the largest human migration in the history of the planet. When 1 million people left a relatively tiny nation, as 1 million more people in Ireland were in the process of dying in some of the worst ways imaginable. First the babies, and then the elderly, and then you get the idea, the disease-ridden and so forth. So of the 1 million Irish who came across the ocean more than 160 years ago, one was my unattended minor great-great-grandfather. His name was John. He wasn't alone. He was coming with a family member. He had a sister named Honora. She was 10 or 11 years old. When Honora died on what was uncharitably referred to as a coffin ship, which was what the ships of 1847 to 1849 were referred to as, John wrapped her in the only blanket that the two had between them, and with the help of other passengers, dropped her over the side. and the Atlantic waters. When those Irish people, 1 million of them, arrived, mostly in the St. Lawrence Seaway and on the Hudson River, they were interred, and rightly so, because there has to be an immigration process rightly administered. We are, after all, a nation of laws. It is the case that the federal government, state governments, particularly that of New York, and provincial governments in Canada, interred Irish, many of them on the same ships they'd arrived on, ships they'd been on for 2 to 3 months. Many of them had been sick when they got on. Virtually all of them were grossly malnourished. Typhoid fever, scarlet fever, and other illnesses continued to claim lives, and untold thousands of bodies were dumped into the waters of the St. Lawrence Seaway, as well as the Hudson River. However, a lot of people literally spent a part of their lives, and some spent all of their lives because they died of infectious disease, a lot of nuns and others, in the care of these sick and diseased and fearful and no visible means of support immigrants. An awful lot of us in this room squarely wouldn't be here if some of these relatively unsavory, undesirable, and as seen by many, disgraceful persons had not made the perilous journey to our shores. But that's only my disgraceful relatives. Others of us here who trace our heritage to Southern Europe, others of us who have Jewish heritage, those of us who are Italians, have been called a great many things by those who saw our arrival as somehow unwelcome, unhelpful, and harmful to the nation. The net effect of immigration on our nation has always, broadly speaking, been very positive. Because you know that people who take we've been asked, we have either passion or somewhere in the middle, like me, have been asked to withhold our applause, and I think we should. I think we should listen as well, whether somebody speaks our own language or that of another. I'll close with just this. I've said too much already, which is a perennial peril of being Irish. I'll simply say that the well-being of children is something that all of us agree upon, and I want to acknowledge that those here tonight who would see things differently from me are driven by worthy passions and interests. The well-being of our country is important. The well-being of all the world's children is important. I would just ask that we together remember the generations of children, many of whom were our brave ancestors who came here unattended. Some came legally, and probably a great many. But the children who are lodging, 24 of them, in our juvenile facility, are also in a legal process. I don't view them as having committed a crime any more than my own children have been cited for speeding from the back seat of my Dodge. I'm not proud that I've been speeding in my Dodge. But children are a people of a different moral agency than we adults. We all understand that. Finally, in addition to clumsily representing Irish Americans here tonight, an unbidden role, I'm sure, I represent somebody else, and many people here do as well. His name was mentioned at the outset of our meeting. He said, "Let the little children come unto me, and do not hinder them, for truly theirs is the kingdom of God." He was not speaking about immigration policy. Thank goodness, perhaps. He didn't address a whole lot of painful flashpoint issues that plague us today. But he was certainly speaking about the innate worth and dignity, the image of his Father, in every single person. And he was reminding those who find it easy to overlook the well-being and the moral agency and the desperate circumstances of children, that it is something that those who would follow him would share. That we stand for justice and we stand for law, but those laws are founded first on compassion and the innate dignity of what it is to share humanity. That's what has made us the United States, because this is a land of opportunity. This is a place where every child has a chance.
First one, start off by saying I appreciate your comments earlier about the environment. We're really excited about being here for that. My name is Patrick Russell, and just wanted to say that I'm here in support of the refugees being held in the detention center. And while I totally agree that we have an immigration issue in the country, I completely disagree with the idea of using children to achieve our political objectives.
I have heard a lot of fear-mongering tonight, and a lot of facts that aren't quite presented. For example, the spike in measles is because in this country it's due to religious sects that don't want their children vaccinated. It hasn't been put to the immigrant community. In 2008, Congress passed a law, bipartisan law, that children from these countries were to be given due process to see if they were actually in need of asylum. So as a country of law, we follow that law. And as a country, I also haven't heard a way to solve the problem. These children are walking into our country. Do we tell them to go back? And if they keep walking, what do we do? Do we shoot them? I mean, I don't, yeah, put up a fence, but right now they're walking in. What do you expect us to do with them? They are children. I also think that we have to take some responsibility for what happened as the unintended consequences of the 70s and 80s, but also, who's running all of this? Where are these problems coming from? Drug cartels. Who's consuming the drugs? The people in the United States of America are consuming the drugs. So we are complicit in some of this problem also. And I do commend you for taking these children in and for giving them a place. I think that it's very important to be a compassionate
I
nation.
apologize for my dress, but today I was serving the at-risk youth of Augusta County. It's what I do in my part-time gig. I work in schools during the school year. The at-risk youth in Augusta County that I serve are boys, girls. Today it was middle school girls. We talked about teen pregnancy prevention. Did it do any good? I hope so. Did I make an impact? I hope so. I moved here from the Outer Banks in 1992 to attend college. I attended Eastern Mennonite and I got an excellent education. I have no religious affiliation whatsoever. I couldn't tell you what's written in the Bible. Don't tell the people at Eastern Mennonite that. But I hear people saying, quoting the Bible all the time. And from someone who serves the at-risk youth in Augusta County, I've made my profession in doing that. Your tax-paying dollars pay me, thank you. For me not to be able to stand up and speak about youth in our community, and they are in our community. It doesn't matter how you get here, you're in our community. Sign me up, let me serve those youth. We need compassion. And I hear people all the time, compassion, compassion. Where are the young people with their compassion? I'm your young person. I'm ready, I can serve. If we all just think, wow, these are just kids. Let us help them. They're here through no fault of their own. I know the gangs of Augusta County, Stanton, Waynesboro, Rockbridge, Rockingham, Harrisonburg. I know those gang members. I work with those gang members. They are no different than the youth sitting in that detention center. They are no different than the youth coming across the border through no fault of their own. They've been thrust upon us. So let's serve them. Let's help them. Let's welcome them. Let's not make them feel like criminals if they are not. That's all.
I'm here to support what you're doing here in Augusta County. I have been to Guatemala at least 9, maybe 10 times. I have been to El Salvador, I've been to Honduras. I see the conditions that these children are living in. I would not return to El Salvador. I would not return to Honduras unless God called me to do that. I will go back to Guatemala because that's where my heart belongs. The children there I've bonded with children there and families there. But the conditions that they live in there, I've seen them, I've lived in them, and I see what they're running from. And I've seen the gangs, I've been there, and I would run too. So we are looking at kids here. We're not looking at adults that can fend for themselves. We're looking at children. I would like to talk to the kids. I'd like to hear their stories. I read, Mr. Carafa, I read the 2 interviews that you did. I'd like to hear more because we hear that these are criminals and the acts that they've done. I didn't read any of that. So I want to hear more, and I think that the community needs to hear more of what these kids have been through and what they've lived, that they're not getting but maybe 1 meal, if that, a day. That they're living in the trash dump in Guatemala, and that they are, that
5 and 6-year-olds are carrying wood stacks up, 4 and 5 miles a day to earn money for their family to make it in Guatemala City. The community needs to hear these kids' stories and what they're running.
My name is Isabel Castillo, and I'm here in support of the refugee children. And I just want to throw out a fact. Undocumented immigrants paid $11.2 billion in taxes in 2012, while GE paid nothing. So undocumented immigrants do pay taxes. But we're here to talk about the children who are in Verona. And so I encourage you, County Board of Supervisors, to visit these children and hear their stories. So I'm just here in support of the children.
My father came here in the 1940s from Bahamas. He was here to pick apples in this Nelson County, all the way from West Virginia and around. Maybe some of you all old enough to know that it existed here. Well, he didn't go back, so he was undocumented. I'm one of 9 children. I served in the U.S. military, to the Vietnam era, across the service in Waynesboro, Virginia, retired. 5 brothers and sisters. My baby sister is 54. My older sister's almost 70. I call to the problem here. Undocumented man. Undocumented man. Speaking to them, so. He was undocumented. And there's going to be a lot of undocumented coming. There always have been. There always will be. I hear fear. And when I don't know what that fear is, whether it's your wallet, it's my wallet. I pay taxes. My brothers and sisters pay taxes. I'm not angry with you because you do have to pay. But it saddens me because I've been in areas where kids were in dumps looking for food. I'm that kid. In Waynesboro, Virginia. That's what I was doing. Looking for something to eat. Because my father, he returned to the house and he couldn't come back. But I thank that man that he came to the United States. I don't feel bad. I didn't feel bad because he never was able to come back. And he died there. So when I hear all these stories about those people, and when I was working for the post office, it was guys, and I was the first black to work in the post office in Waynesboro. And I heard the people there tell me about those Mexican kids they saw walking toward the Kroger stores. And the only thing I could think of, how many times you talked about me, or my black brothers and sisters that live here in Virginia, or throughout this whole land. The slaves, remember? The people who yet still are not free. And you can point your finger and say, look at them now. They weren't that way. So there could be a design situation to make you fail. I've witnessed it. I'm 64 years old. I've witnessed it. I keep witnessing it. And every time I hear even a black person today, can you believe these Mexicans are here? Shut up. That's what I say. Shut up. You have no right to talk. Everybody else came here. They were complaining about you. It's a shame. It bothers me deeply. Because I see it every day. I hear it every day. But then I hear a good side too. Because before I came, I asked, be honest with me. And there were people that I see in the community. Tell me what you think about the children coming here. Their kids, Chris. Their children, Chris. You gotta take care of the kids, Chris. You gotta take care of the kids.
I've been to Guatemala several times. I've seen conditions in neighboring countries. Two points that I'd like to get at. Most of the, we call it income-based housing here, there is no income there. Did a presentation a couple years back, the average annual income is about $1,200 a year in Guatemala. exchange rate's 8-to-1, so math doesn't really work out very well for them. But we went through several neighborhoods where the neighborhood consisted of what we would see as the old 10-by-10 metal storage buildings. And you had families of 8 living in these buildings. I don't know if you've ever had one of those buildings. You can't secure that building. Gangs are rampant. And I had a discussion with an elderly friend of mine earlier today, and she was on the other side of this than I am. So I explained to her saying that just imagine that you're in your house and your 2 kids are with you. And they're underage, they can't go out on their own yet. And you know that this neighborhood's getting ready to wipe off the map, the bomb's gonna hit. But you have no means to leave this house. They can't carry you, you can't walk, you can't get out. Are you gonna ask them to stay there with you while you all die? Or are you gonna send them off? You're gonna send them off. And if you have a 12-year-old that can carry your 4-year-old, great. If you don't, you're gonna send your 4-year-old off and hope for the best. Thank y'all.